There is a moment in every life when someone says something that cuts deep, a careless comment, a betrayal, a dismissal, and in that moment, your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your pulse spikes, and you feel it, anger, frustration, irritation. But what if I told you that you could train yourself to never react that way again? Not because you've become numb, but because you've evolved, because you've risen above it. Because you've discovered something that most people never realize in a lifetime. That power is not in how loud you respond, but in how calmly you choose not to. Body C, the most misunderstood emotion in the human experience is anger. We think it's a sign of strength. We think if we don't get angry, we're being weak or passive or submissive, but nothing could be further from the truth. Anger isn't power, clarity is power, self-control is power. Understanding the game being played and choosing not to play is power. When someone offends you, insults you, criticizes you, it's never actually about you, it's about them. People project pain, people reflect chaos. People transmit fear, but you don't have to absorb it. You don't have to take that chaos into your body and call it your own. You can look at it, understand it, and let it pass by like a wave that never touches the shore. The secret to never being bothered lies in this one shift. Take nothing personally. That's right. Nothing. Because what people say to you is a reflection of their reality, not yours. If someone calls you useless and you know your worth, you don't need to defend it. You need to smile because their words have no hold over someone who knows who they are. But this isn't just a mindset. It's a practice, and it begins with one word, curiosity. The next time someone triggers you, pause and ask, what are they going through that makes them act this way? Curiosity dismantles defensiveness. It opens a door where most would build a wall. Then add to that another question, what part of me feels attacked? And why? Because our triggers are our teachers. The more we understand our own pain, the less power others have to poke it. And here's the final key, redefine the goal. Most people go into conversations aiming to win. You should aim to understand. Most people enter conflict to prove something. You should enter with the goal to learn something. That shift turns you from a reactor into a leader, from a fighter into a builder. In the middle of chaos, the ability to pause is not just an emotional advantage. It is a superpower. That moment of silence between stimulus and response is where transformation happens. Most people live life on autopilot, constantly reacting to everything around them. Someone cuts them off in traffic. They shout. Someone criticizes their work. They snap. Someone disagrees with them. They explode. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted, misunderstood, and emotionally drained. But the truth is, every single one of those situations could have gone differently if they had just taken a second, one intentional breath, a pause. The pause is where power is born. It's the place where emotion meets awareness. It's the space where you shift from being controlled to being in control. That pause allows you to override your primitive response system, fight, flight, freeze, and engage the higher brain, the part of you that makes choices based on vision, not just reaction. It's the difference between snapping and staying composed, between saying something you regret and saying something that builds trust, between escalating a problem and dissolving it before it ever takes root. When you pause, you're not suppressing your feelings. You're processing them. You're giving your nervous system a moment to catch up to your values. You're aligning yourself with who you want to be, rather than letting a single moment drag you back into who you used to be. This isn't weakness. It's discipline, it's leadership, it's emotional maturity, and it's rare, because most people have never trained themselves to pause. But the ones who do, they lead, they inspire. They carry an invisible strength that makes people stop and listen. Pausing is also a form of deep listening, not to the other person, but to yourself. In that stillness, you can hear your inner voice more clearly. You get to ask yourself questions like, Is this worth my energy? What outcome do I want here? What would the best version of me do in this moment? That kind of inner clarity doesn't come when we're rushing to react. It only comes in the quiet, and that quiet comes from the pause. The beauty of the pause is that it gives you space to choose your story. Most people let anger write their script. They let resentment and pride speak for them. But when you pause, you become the author of your next sentence, your next decision, your next interaction. And when you begin living that way, you no longer see people as threats, but as opportunities to grow. You no longer see conflict as something to avoid or dominate, but as something to navigate with wisdom. Learning to pause doesn't mean becoming passive or soft. It means becoming so secure in your identity that you don't need to react to every challenge thrown your way. You begin to understand that your energy is precious, and not every situation deserves a piece of it. The pause becomes your boundary, your shield, and your gateway to better outcomes. There's an incredible shift that happens in life when you stop taking things personally. The moment you truly understand that people's words and actions are almost always a reflection of their own inner state you begin to free yourself from the emotional roller coaster they can create. What someone says to you is not a diagnosis of who you are. It's a mirror of what they're carrying. Their anger, their insecurity, their bitterness, their stress, it leaks out in the form of criticism, judgment, and projection. And if you internalize it, you've allowed someone else's pain to take root in your peace. Most people walk around with emotional wounds they haven't healed from. They speak from those wounds. They behave from those wounds. They lash out not because of what you've done, but because of what they haven't resolved. And yet, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking their reaction is a direct evaluation of your worth. That's where we get stuck. That's where we give our power away. But when you step back and see that their behavior is about them, not you, you give yourself permission to stay centered. Taking things personally is a habit, and like any habit, it can be broken with awareness. It usually comes from an internal need for validation or a lingering fear of not being good enough. That's why a simple comment or criticism can feel like a personal attack. It's not just what was said. It's the meaning you assign to it. But here's the truth. Meaning is a choice. You get to decide what something means. You get to interpret the story. And when you choose to believe that their behavior isn't personal, you take your power back instantly. Imagine someone walking into a room and throwing paint at everyone. If you're hit, is it about you? No, it's about the person with the paint. That's how projection works. People throw emotional paint everywhere, and the ones who haven't learned to protect themselves take it personally. But the ones who understand what's happening step aside. They see the paint coming and realize, this isn't mine. I'm not going to carry it. Taking nothing personally doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding from every small cut. It means you begin to lead yourself emotionally, refusing to let the unpredictable behavior of others dictate your inner climate. It also means you recognize that everyone is fighting battles you can't see. And sometimes, the things people say have far more to do with what they're avoiding in themselves than what they see in you. This mindset shift is one of the most liberating changes you can make. It creates emotional distance, not to disconnect from people, but to protect your perspective. When someone speaks from fear, you respond with understanding. When someone moves from insecurity, you respond from confidence. You become immune to the energy that once triggered you because you see it for what it truly is, noise from a storm that doesn't belong to you. When conflict arises, the natural human response is to protect, defend, or attack. Most people feel the need to prove they're right, justify their emotions, or assert control over the conversation. This reaction is driven by fear, fear of being misunderstood, fear of looking weak, fear of being taken advantage of. But there is a much more powerful and transformative response available: curiosity. When you choose curiosity instead of conflict, you shift from emotional reactivity to intentional leadership. You move away from judgment and toward understanding, and in that space, tension begins to dissolve. Curiosity changes the game because it reframes the situation. Instead of thinking, asterisk, why are they doing this to me? Asterisk, you start asking, asterisk, what's really going on with them? Asterisk, that question opens the door to empathy. And empathy does not excuse bad behavior, but it explains it. When you're curious, you begin to see the patterns. You notice that the anger directed at you isn't about you. It's about pressure in their life, frustration they haven't voiced, insecurities they haven't dealt with. Curiosity allows you to put yourself in their shoes, not to accept mistreatment, but to approach the situation with a deeper perspective. This shift also impacts your own internal dialogue. When you're triggered, instead of jumping into defensive mode, curiosity invites you to ask, asterisk, why did that bother me so much? Asterisk, maybe the comment touched a wound you haven't fully healed. Maybe it challenged a belief you've never questioned. Maybe it brought up a fear you've been avoiding. The power of curiosity is that it helps you locate the real problem, not just the surface disagreement, but the emotional truth underneath. And when you deal with the root, the fruit changes. The conflict starts to lose its grip because you're addressing it from a deeper, wiser place. Curiosity is a leadership posture. It means you're not afraid of other perspectives. You don't need to shut people down. You don't have to win every argument. You're secure enough to explore, to ask questions, to listen without preparing a counterattack. This is where emotional intelligence grows. This is where relational trust is built. Because when people feel heard, they lower their defenses, and often, what starts as tension ends in connection, not because the problem magically disappeared, but because someone had the strength to ask instead of assume. Curiosity also creates space for solutions. When you approach someone with openness, they feel it. They stop seeing you as an opponent and start seeing you as a partner in the process. From that energy, real conversations begin. Misunderstandings get cleared, intentions are clarified, and even if there isn't total agreement, there's mutual respect. This doesn't just apply to heated arguments. It applies to daily life. Whether it's your partner being short with you, a coworker acting cold, or a friend who suddenly pulls away, curiosity opens the door to deeper understanding. You start to see people not as problems to fix or threats to conquer, but as humans with stories, with struggles, and with reasons behind their actions. Every time something triggers you, it reveals something much deeper than the situation itself. Triggers are not random. They are rooted in unhealed pain, past disappointments, and unresolved emotions. When someone says or does something that causes you to react with disproportionate anger, frustration, or sadness, that reaction is a window into something within you that is still waiting to be addressed. The trigger is not the problem, it's the messenger, and most people spend their entire lives silencing the messenger instead of listening to what it's trying to teach them. When you get triggered, your body reacts before your brain can even process the situation. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your muscles tense. That's not just a reaction to the present moment. It's a replay of something your nervous system remembers. Maybe it's the way someone raised their voice that reminded you of being belittled as a child. Maybe it's a dismissive comment that echoes an old rejection. Maybe it's a perceived lack of respect that pokes at a deep need to be seen and valued. The surface situation may be minor, but the emotional weight behind it can feel massive because it touches an older wound. And this is where your growth lies. Every trigger you experience is an invitation to go inward, to ask, asterisk, why does this upset me so much? What belief is being challenged here? What fear is being activated? Asterisk, these questions shift your focus from blaming the other person to understanding yourself. They transform the trigger from a source of pain into a source of power. Because the more self-aware you become, the less control those old wounds have over you, and the less power others have to manipulate or shake your peace. Most people believe that avoiding their triggers is the goal. They think that if they can just control their environment, eliminate difficult people, or keep themselves busy, they can escape being triggered. But real strength comes not from avoidance, but from awareness. It comes from sitting with your discomfort long enough to understand it. It comes from doing the uncomfortable work of healing, layer by layer. And as you do that, your emotional reactions become less automatic. You begin to respond from a place of wisdom, not woundedness. This process isn't easy. It requires honesty. It requires patience. It requires the courage to look at yourself without judgment. But it's worth it, because once you begin to heal the places inside you that are tender, you stop letting the outside world control your emotional thermostat. You no longer hand people the remote to your peace. You no longer feel the need to react just to protect your ego or your identity. Instead, you begin to understand that your triggers are your teachers. They are pointing to the places in you that are still seeking attention, still longing for closure, still aching for understanding. And when you embrace that truth, you start to grow in ways you never imagined. You stop being the victim of your emotions and become the architect of your response. You rise above the chaos not by escaping it, but by learning from it. When you know who you are, the opinions of others lose their grip on your emotions. Confidence doesn't come from applause or validation. It comes from clarity. The more you understand your own values, your purpose, and your identity, the less you feel the need to explain yourself or seek approval. This inner stability is what separates those who are constantly shaken by criticism from those who remain composed in the face of judgment. When you're rooted in your identity, you don't chase affirmation because you already walk in confirmation. One of the biggest sources of anger, insecurity, and defensiveness comes from forgetting who you are. When someone questions your value, challenges your decisions, or disrespects you, it's easy to internalize that feedback if you haven't built a strong foundation of self-awareness. That's when you start doubting yourself. That's when you start reacting out of fear. But when your identity is secure, you realize that someone else's opinion is not your truth. It's simply their perspective, shaped by their own experiences, limitations, and biases. This doesn't mean you ignore feedback or close yourself off from growth. It means you filter everything through the lens of your self-worth. You ask, does this align with who I know myself to be? If it doesn't, you don't absorb it. You acknowledge it, perhaps learn from it, but you don't let it define you. That kind of clarity is rare. Most people are so disconnected from their identity that they become like emotional chameleons, constantly shifting who they are based on the environment or the people around them. But those who are deeply rooted stay consistent, regardless of the chaos around them. Building a strong identity requires intentional work. It requires reflection, discipline, and honesty. It means you spend time with yourself, not just to enjoy silence, but to ask the deeper questions. Asterisk, what do I stand for? What matters most to me? What am I not willing to compromise on? Asterisk, the more clear your answers, the stronger your identity becomes. And with a strong identity comes emotional resilience. People will always have something to say. Some will praise you, others will mock you. Some will support you, and others will tear you down just to make themselves feel better. But none of that has power over you unless you give it permission. When your identity is unshakable, their noise becomes just that. Noise. It doesn't pierce. It doesn't stick. It doesn't slow you down. You become the kind of person who doesn't just survive criticism. You thrive in it because you know who you are. You know what you bring. You walk into every room with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to impress, because presence speaks louder than performance. There's an energy that radiates from someone who is rooted. You can feel it when they walk into a room. They don't posture, they don't defend, they don't seek attention. Their strength is silent but undeniable, because their identity doesn't come from external applause. It comes from internal alignment. They've done the work. They've built the foundation, and now they live from a place that no insult, no rejection, and no false judgment can touch. Choosing peace over ego is not weakness. It is wisdom in its most powerful form. In a world where everyone is fighting to be right, to be heard, to be seen as important, it takes incredible strength to choose calm over chaos. The ego constantly demands attention. It wants to be validated, defended, and exalted. It tells you that every disagreement is a threat, every insult is an attack, and every slight is a battle you must win. But peace tells a different story. Peace says you don't have to fight every war just because your pride feels wounded. Peace says you can rise above instead of sink to their level. Peace whispers that your time, energy, and emotional well-being are too valuable to be wasted on meaningless conflict. When you lead with ego, you are easily provoked. A comment, a look, a misunderstanding, these things trigger instant reactions because your sense of identity is tied to how others treat you. But when you operate from a place of inner peace, your response becomes intentional instead of impulsive. You realize that not every situation requires your voice, not every battle needs your sword, and not every offense deserves your energy. You see things as they are, not through the distorted lens of pride. And that clarity becomes your protection. Living from peace doesn't mean you never stand up for yourself. It means you know asterisk, when asterisk and asterisk, how asterisk to do it. You don't scream to be heard. You speak with conviction. You don't insult to defend your worth. You let your presence speak for itself. You don't react in rage. You respond with purpose. This is the kind of composure that unsettles small minds because it cannot be manipulated. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't bite, they lose control. And in that moment, you remain powerful, not because you overpowered them, but because you never allowed them to overpower you. This mindset frees you. You no longer feel the need to prove your value to people who are determined not to see it. You don't chase after arguments to feel superior or demand apologies to feel justified. You let go not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. You begin to understand that peace is a choice you make every day, in every interaction, in every moment where your ego says fight, and your wisdom says breathe. And every time you choose peace, you build emotional discipline, you build strength, you build character. There is nothing more liberating than knowing you are not a prisoner to your emotions. You are not a puppet controlled by the opinions or behaviors of others. You have the power to walk away, to smile without resentment, to stay calm in storms that used to shake you. And that power multiplies every time you choose peace over ego. It shows in your posture, in your decisions, in your relationships. You become the kind of person who others look to not for drama, but for direction, not for noise, but for wisdom, not for conflict, but for clarity, because you've trained yourself to rise above, and in doing so, you've reclaimed your freedom from everything that used to disturb your soul.